Well, good afternoon to you all on this sixth day of Level 4 lockdown in South Africa. My name is Mark Long. I'm rector of the parish of St Andrew in Newlands, Cape Town. In our Eucharist readings, we continue to journey through the Gospel of John. We're now in chapter 12, towards the end. And in it, Jesus declares that those who believe in him actually believe in the one who sent him. And I think that that's an important distinction for us to hear. Over these 40 days plus of lockdown that we've been enduring here, it struck me how in many of the readings, particularly in Acts, how the declaration of or the recognition of Jesus and the subsequent proclamation of who Jesus is directly linked to the Jewish concept of Messiah. Even in John's Gospel, the point of recognition where Peter, as John tells it, Peter acknowledges Jesus as Messiah. He says, "You are the Holy One of God in our midst." Now I raise this because I think that there's a level to which sometimes we over-obsess about Jesus. Now that's not to say that Jesus isn't critically important in the story of salvation and God's activity in our world. But we need to hear these passages where Jesus points to the Father, points beyond himself to God. And it's very clear to me, certainly in the other three Gospels, as well as John, that Jesus really doesn't draw attention to himself very often. He continuously deflects that towards the Father. He speaks of himself as an ambassador, one who has been sent, who speaks on behalf of. Passages like today, of course, are a little confusing in the sense that Jesus says, "If you believe in me, actually you believe in the Father." Goes on to then speak of himself in incarnational terms, particularly this light that comes into the world and that shines forth. And in fact, if we look at church history, the church for the next 8 centuries obsesses about the nature of Jesus and the levels of divinity that he actually carried. And our orthodox belief eventually embracing the concept that, in fact, Jesus is God. And so there's a whole lot there that is far too difficult to grapple with in 4 minutes. But I have a deep sense that we do overly obsess about Jesus, and we spend more time believing in Jesus, as it were, than we do believing in God, the one whom Jesus often speaks about, that he came to actually represent and point us to. And I think in terms of just our own holding of our faith, that it's an important thing for us to reflect on. Because while we obsess on Jesus, we then want to see Jesus as the only way to God. But in fact, God works in amazing ways, in different places, in different people's lives, in different cultures, and in different faith perspectives. And we need to recognize that, and we need to embrace God in the greater breadth of our world and in the greater breadth of human experience. And I think if we can do that, and we can begin working together in that broader interfaith space, so our proclamation of all that God is can become so much more powerful. The psalm today, 67 I think it is, reflects on something of God's blessing seen in all the earth. And how do we see that blessing when we continuously want to exclude people from what it means to be part of what God is doing? So much of what happens in Acts is in fact God breaking for the Jewish disciples those barriers, getting them to think beyond themselves and recognize that God is working even amongst the Gentiles, those who are not considered to be Jewish. And in our own day, we've kind of recreated that sense of God only works in this way or that way. And we really do need to break out of that if we're going to meaningfully share our faith in the world in which we live. So I leave those thoughts with you for a bit of cogitation.